Hello and welcome to another Eternal Bookstore BookNook customization video. I've been packing up the dolls and the art supplies and getting ready for our move because we have found a house to buy finally and we hope to be in there soon. In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to make a sliding library ladder that you can use in your BookNook, whether it is open or closed. And if you don't know what I mean by that, be sure to check out my playlist where you can see how I converted the Eternal Bookstore BookNook into a Roombox. This technique can also be used to make a sliding door, like a barn door style door with hardware hanging above it, just like on the library ladder, and I'm going to show you how to do both. So even if you don't have a library in your BookNook or your dollhouse, you can use this technique to make a sliding barn door. All right, to get started, you're going to need a ladder made out of some wood, and I made my original ladder from the kit scrap. And if you use the kit scrap for your window, you may still have a piece like this left over, and you can just cut another piece off to edge it with. Another thing you can do is take some skinny sticks and split them in half and then drill some holes evenly spaced. And these are just toothpicks that are stuck in between the two side pieces there. I made myself a little hand drill by taking a small drill bit and gluing it into an old paintbrush handle, and I used that to drill evenly spaced holes. And then I used either toothpicks or skewers and shaved the ends of those a little bit so that they would fit in between there, and then they would sort of stop. They wouldn't slide freely across the whole rung. Glued that together and clamped it. The next thing you'll need is something to slide your letter across. You could use a skewer like this and just cut it, or you could use some of the brass tubing from the Hobby Lobby like I used. You could also use a solid brass rod, but you wouldn't be able to put the beads on the end. So if you have a wood stick that you're going to use, sand the edges of that, and you may want to paint it gold or some other color. And then we're going to need to make the hooks that are going to hold this on the bookcase and allow our library ladder to slide on it. I made my hooks out of some 12 gauge copper wire, which is very heavy. You're not going to want to use your good jewelry making wire cutters to cut wire like this. You're going to want to use some hardware store wire cutters that are more heavy duty. I cut two pieces about 1.5 inches long and hammered one end about 1/2 inch to just maybe even 1/4 inch. Here you can see in the original, the two copper wires are pointed to by the arrows, and then you can see I have my brass tube nestled in there. I believe this wire is 12 gauge copper wire, and again, it's very heavy duty, and I'm cutting off about 1.5 inches, and if you have a file, you can file the sharp edges flat, and then you'll want to have 2 pairs of pliers. Obviously, an emery board isn't going to file this flat. You would use a metal file, like you could use even a diamond nail file. So I have my rectangle nose pliers here. There are no grippy teeth on these pliers, and I need to flatten one end flat. And I don't have my hammer out anymore, so I'm not going to do that in this video, but that upper part there will be flat, and then I'm going to bend it. And I want it bent at a 90-degree angle, and then I'm going to take the pliers and hold onto the wire so that I can use my round nose pliers to curl a half circle up to make a hook. If you don't have round nose pliers, you should definitely get some if you're going to be making miniatures, but you could try to roll it around a pen or something, but I haven't tried that, so I don't know if it'll work. And then I'm just going to cut the excess off so that I have a flat edge. And I'll make 2 of these, and these will be inserted between the upper and lower bookshelves on wall I. Now, this is only going to work for those of you who have followed my tutorials on how to convert Eternal Bookstore BookNook into a Roombox. If you haven't followed those tutorials and you still have the walkway across the top of the other side there, then you're not going to have a place to insert these hooks, and you're going to need to figure out another way to make that happen. One thing that might work is trying to use some small eye hooks and attach them to the bottom of the walkway above the bookshelf. Here you can see that the flat part is in between the upper and lower bookshelf, and I just glued it to the lower bookshelf with a little bit of wood glue. You could also use super glue for that. All right, now how do we get our ladder to attach? I used some glue ends or some fold over crimp on ends, and these are cord ends used in jewelry making. Usually they're sold near the leather or other cording, and you want to choose one that's going to fit the end of whatever you're using for your ladder. So if you're using round skewer type things for your ladder uprights, then you'll want to use a round end. And if your edges are square, then you'll look for a square or rectangular end. You can make one or the other work. You could whittle off a little bit of the rectangle to make it more round and fit in a round glue-on end if that is all you have. Jewelry making supplies are really excellent for making miniatures, and as you look at these, you might see that you could use these for something else, like that silver temple glue-in cord end in the upper third picture would make a really excellent bell. So these are really handy things to have. I'm definitely thinking about using a row of these for my servants' bells in my Georgian cabinet house. Here we have the fold over crimp ends, and these are meant to fold over sort of flat onto a piece of cording, but they work really well for those rectangular edged ladders, and these I will demonstrate later on in the video. Then we need the part that's going to slide along our track, which would be a skewer or the brass tube. Here I'm showing a number of different options for this. These are all pendant bails, and pendant bails are the thing that connects the a necklace pendant to the chain that you wear it on. And they come in all different shapes, sizes, finishes, and styles. In the upper and lower first pictures, you see the kind that I'm using, which is kind of like almost like a little lever, kind of like a paper clip-ish type of thing that you would stick through the loop on the cord end, and that will allow you to hang your ladder from the tube. And then over on the right, in the bottom, I wanted to show that they do also make ones that screw in, and you may be able to use this in the top of your ladder rather than using any kind of glue-on end. You could just put the screw-in bail into the top of your ladder as long as your track will fit through that loop there. And so that might be an easier option if your ladder is a little bit bigger. Probably not as ideal for the 124 scale, but maybe for the 112 scale. I'm just taking screenshots of these from Google, but you can find things like this at Michael's, probably not the screw-in bails, and sometimes they don't even have pendant bails at Michael's, but check Hobby Lobby or Amazon and you should be able to find them. So here you can see I have a glue-on cord end, and I haven't glued it on. It's square and my skewer is round, but I just rammed it in there, and then I put one of those slip-on pendant bails into the hole there. I'm going to take it off of here and show you what it would look like on the actual square ladder that I have here. And it's a little bit, the opening is a little bit too small, so I have to cut off. Another option is you could whittle out a little half circle like I've done there, and that could slide along the rail. The problem I had with that is that the ladder kept tipping over, and so there was nothing to keep it in place if I moved the room box. So I'm just going to very gently shave off a little tiny bit of this upper part here so that my glue-on end fits in there. And as you do this, you're going to want to pay attention to the orientation of the hole on the, I keep calling it a bail. This is the cord end. The cord end will have a hole, and it has to orient in such a way that the pendant bail there, see, will face the right direction to slide on the tube, and it's not doing that. So I have to take off a little bit more material here so that I can turn that glue-on end a 1/4 turn and have it so that the hole allows the pendant bail to have the orientation of the opening from side to side so that it will fit on my track like so. And now I just need to duplicate that on the other side. Here's what it would look like to use a fold over crimp end for this. Now these can be a little bit tricky. They come in all different sizes, and if you got one small enough, then you could probably just glue it on. But I'm gonna use this. First, I need to peel down the little point there. Sorry, you can hear my cat using a scratching post in the background. I just need to pull that little point down because it will interfere with my wood, and you could just cut that off with your wire cutters. But I like the way the point looks. And then I have to remember the orientation of the opening of the cord end there. And by the opening, I mean the hole. And now the idea is to fold one side down first and then to fold the other side down. And it's very awkward, as you can see. It just keeps falling out. So what I recommend is to get it started first with your pliers. Sometimes it can be very useful to use your round nose pliers for this. And just get one side mostly curved over, and then you can insert your ladder upright there and crimp that down onto it more firmly. And then once you get one side crimped down, then you would fold the other side down on top of that first side, and they will overlap. And you'll want to keep this overlap in the back of the ladder because it's a little bit unsightly. And there we have it. These don't fit quite as nicely as the glue-on ends do, but they are very versatile and could be used for a number of things in making your miniature. Unless you're a metalsmith and know how to make your own metal findings, you may need to kind of bend some of these to your will. So first of all, this is the lever back bail, pendant bail, that I used with the original ladder here with the glue-on ends, and that fits in there just fine. But my crimp-on end has a hole that's not big enough for the little tab on that pendant bail to fit through. So I have two choices here. I can try to edit the pendant bail to somehow not be as thick, but the easier option would be for me to make this hole just slightly larger. And the easiest way for me to do that is with my round nose pliers. Now, one end of round nose pliers, one jaw, is usually slightly more slightly smaller than the other side. So you may have to experiment back and forth to see which side you can even fit in there to begin with. And other things you could use to enlarge this hole would be maybe a large sewing needle. And then I got thinking you could possibly put a hole in the wood of your ladder if your ladder sides are thick enough, and just insert the pendant bail directly into that hole in the ladder. So I decided to just try that to see if it worked. Again, I made this hand drill simply by gluing a little drill bit into an old paintbrush handle, and it works really well. You want to use a really small drill bit, drill bit for this. And then I think this slips right in there and could be an option not only for this ladder, but it could also work for like vertical blinds. Or then I start thinking, hey, wait a minute, I could make a barn door. And so bonus, at the end of the video, I'm going to show you how you can make a sliding barn door. Okay, here's the original ladder I made using my kit scrap, and it's all assembled. And I did it just a little bit differently than what I've talked about in or demonstrated earlier. I used a crimp-on cord end with a pendant bail that did not have a lever. So what I had were two circular holes facing in the same direction, and originally I glued them to each other with super glue. And that worked okay for a while, but the bond didn't really hold. And so I'm going to take that apart right now and change that and show you also how I assembled the balls on the end of the brass rod. So here you can see what that looks like up close. Here's the kit scrap, and I finished it with the Rust-Oleum stain markers, and then again I have those two things glued together at the top there. So I'm going to take this apart and I'll show you how I assembled that later. See how I glued those? Those are really called ribbon bales because a ribbon is supposed to go through that part and a pendant hangs off the little circular part at the bottom. And I glued that bottom circular part to the hole on the crimp end. So I'm going to take these off of here. It looks like I'm cutting it, but I'm really just using that to kind of twist it, and it comes right off. There we go. I'm sorry if it's confusing that I'm showing you what I had done to the original ladder and how I'm changing it, but I just wanted to show you that you could glue those two pieces together if you don't have the right parts. And I wanted to show you that I found a better way since I made my original ladder, and now I'm redoing that ladder with this better method. All right, here are some other pendant bales. That's the ribbon bale that I was using. As you can see, they come in different widths and finishes, and the width of this I had to make slightly wider at the top to fit that brass rod, and I again just used my round nose pliers for this. You can see that the jaws are conical in shape. That means that they're shaped like a cone, and so I can just sort of work that up and press down, widening the opening there as I get closer to the depth of the jaws, and that makes it a little wider. Here are some that you wouldn't be able to widen, but they are quite decorative. They have a nice pattern on them. It still fits on there. They're all different kinds of these bales. And again, the direction of this hole is going to matter. You can't turn this one around. So if you wanted to use that on this one, you would either have to glue it because it won't connect. So you'd have to glue it or possibly wire it together. You could use a jump ring, but I think that would look kind of junky. Always have a push pin handy. They make great tools. All right, got that glue out of there. All right, now the finishes on these don't match, but that's okay. I can use an oil-based gold paint marker to make that pendant bale gold after I enlarge in this hole and get it to fit on there. And there that is. It looks very nice, and it looks better than it would look if I had to use a jump ring, because the jump ring would just be rickety. Now, if you need to, you could turn these around to the side so that you could use one of the pendant bales that goes in a different direction like this. But not every pendant bale is going to be openable like these snap-on ones are, so you're just going to have to check on that. The other thing you're going to want to be careful of is making sure that these are lined up such that they can slide nicely on the stick there, on the brass rod. And I'm going to roughen these up with my emery board so that I can make them the same color. Now, I use my flush cutters to cut my brass rod, and it crimps one end a little bit. If you want them to match, just cut both ends off and they'll match. And then you want to file that down on a metal file or a diamond nail file. And then here's where I'm testing to make sure that those two pendant bales are lined up such that it slides easily across the tube. And then this tube, I don't want it to slide off of the hooks, and so that's why I'm using these ball pins, also known as head pins, but they're ball pins because they have a ball on the end, and the round beads there. So here are head pins, and they have a flat end, and these are jewelry making findings. They're not sewing pins, and you can't use sewing pins for this because sewing pins are way too hard, and if you try to bend them, they will likely break and have a sharp end. But you can see these come in all lengths and finishes, all different kinds. I like the ball end ones the best because I think they're the most versatile and decorative. But if you don't want to see the end, then the head pin is great. And so what I did is I just put a slight curve in this ball pin in order to have it have somewhat of like a tension what am I trying to say? Like on a curtain rod, sometimes you'll see stuff like this and it holds it in there because of the tension created by the curve in that pin. So I'm doing this on both sides, and this is both decorative and helps it to not slide off of the hooks that are in the bookcase. You could use this for a curtain rod as well, and it would work really well. So to put that on there, you're just going to disassemble your little end ball there and then put it back on after you put the ladder on, and there you have it. It slides back and forth easily. And now I'm just going to color those with a oil-based paint marker. This is the Craft Smart Gold oil-based marker from Michaels. You could also use Tester's Model Paint, which they also sell at Michaels, but they have also at other hobby stores like Hobby Lobby. You just want to, anytime you're painting metal, you just want to roughen up the surface of it so that the paint has something to stick to. When it's something like this where you're not going to be handling it a whole bunch, this will work just fine. I don't see any need to spray it with any kind of coating or anything, but if it was going to be handled a lot, you might want to spray it with like a Krylon clear acrylic. And if your rod is a painted wooden stick, you might want to spray that because there is some rubbing that happens there. Okay, let's make our sliding door. First, you're just going to need some kind of wood for your door, or I'm making mine out of 3 pieces of cereal box cardboard. Technically, this is cat food box cardboard. Comes out of the boxes that come with the cans of food. And I'm not doing any measuring here because I don't actually have a doorway for this door. I just want to show you how I would go about constructing a sliding barn door. So I'm cutting 3 layers of this cardboard, and then I'm going to glue them together tightly with some tacky glue. I'm going to embed the ribbon bales in between the layers of cardboard in order to provide the hanging hardware for this sliding door. And I'm going to put some cross braces and a handle on this, and I'm making all of that out of the same cardboard. This spatula you see me using for my glue is actually a painting tool from an art store. It's a Princeton Catalyst wedge, and it's used for applying paint to a canvas, kind of like a painting knife. These are great because they're silicone and the glue washes off of them really easily. I'll put a link to one of these on my Pinterest board where I link all of the tools that I like to use for my miniatures so that you can find it if you're interested in getting one. But you can also just repurpose an old spatula from your kitchen, and they're way cheaper. All right, I'm just going to cut 2 pieces to go across the top and bottom of each side, and then a diagonal piece to go across the center there, which you'll often see on barn doors. But you could do any kind of door here. You could even use a pre-bought dollhouse door to do this. You'll just need to affix the hardware some way, maybe by drilling holes in the top, or you could even drill holes through the door and use a little brad nail or carpet tack to tack the ribbon bales to the top. Just cutting the ends of those on an angle and gluing them down, and then I'm going to weigh that down and let it dry. If you have a lot of gaps in the edges of your cardboard door, you could fill those gaps with some spackle, some light modeling paste from the art store, and then just sand that down later and paint the whole thing. I also recommend painting it prior to adding the hardware, or at the very least taping off the hardware prior to painting it. I didn't do this, and I got a tiny little bit of paint on my hardware, which you'll see in a minute. Okay, so now I'm just using a push pin to make a little gap there in my glued door so that I can insert some glue and place the ribbon bale into the gap. I will get both of these in there, one on each side, right at the edges there, right at the corners, with the ribbon bale still being directly over top of the door, and that way it will slide more easily. And then I'm going to clamp these together, but first I wanted you to see, just in case you forgot, what the ribbon bale looks like. You can see a loose one there at the top, and you can see what they look like glued in there. so you know what to look for. I mean, you could use any kind of bail for this, but that's the one I have, so that's what I'm using. So that's glued in there. I just want it a little bit closer to the edge. And then because my clamp is a binder clip, which has quite a bit of tension to it, I want to make sure that I don't clamp it such that my track, so I don't want it to make the ribbon bails go askew. So I'm putting a popsicle stick on here. This will also prevent my clamp from making marks in the cardboard, and it allows me to slide the tube in there with it clamped so that I can make sure that the clamps are in the right place. All right, here is my finished door, and I've painted it with some white gesso, and that is what it looks like. So now I'm going to show you how they look hanging together. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily hang these together, but I have one tube, and so I wanted to show you what it looked like. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you enjoyed going on this journey with me with Eternal Bookstore. I am very actively in the process of moving now, and so the videos that I'm going to be sharing between now and getting settled in my new house are going to involve some book reviews on books that I have regarding making your own miniatures and books about historical dolls. So hope you'll stay tuned for that. And I'll let you know when we get settled, and I'll share with you how I set up my new art studio in my new house, which is half the size of the house that I live in currently. So that's going to be a challenge. Oh, and also I want to thank everyone so much for the subscriptions and for helping me with all the hours watched, because you're helping me to reach my goal for my YouTube channel, which is just a huge, huge positive thing for me, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Take care.